Guess what? This next episode is a crossover episode. The conversation you're about to hear on the Remotely Serious podcast feed is between me and Richard Bexon. Richard Bexon is the host of the number one real estate and investment podcast in Costa Rica. He's someone with a lot of experience guiding people in coming to Costa Rica, investing in Costa Rica, and buying real estate in Costa Rica. All things which are also of interest to digital nomads and remote workers with an interest in Central America. Hence the crossover appeal. And so I'm excited for you to hear me and Rich speak. And let's jump right in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Remotely Serious. I'm here with Richard Bexon. I assume I'm talking to you I'm in Canada and you're in Costa Rica. I got to say, we don't know each other, but you've been gracious enough to jump on a pod with me. And I have to say, it's kind of one of those unequal relationships in the sense that I've probably listened to going on 60 or 70 of your episodes of your Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast. So it's been just a solid rotation over the last, I would say, 9 months. I've been to Costa Rica a few times, and I'm on this podcast where I'm interested in and we're interested in remote work and digital nomads. And Costa Rica, with its, even before it had a digital nomad visa, was a hotspot for all kinds of travelers going back decades. And more recently, it's known as somewhere that remote workers and digital nomads can head to. So I'm just curious, when you have a long history with your firm in Costa Rica, do you remember when the first time you started to become aware of remote work and or digital nomads as a class of people that was making its way to your neck of the woods?
You know what? I think I remember connecting our phone system. We had an Altigen voice over IP system in 2006. And I'm going back here. Voice over IP systems now are, telephone systems are, they're really easy to get. They're in the cloud. Back then it wasn't. It was a server that was connected to a server in the States. We were able to have people working remotely in Costa Rica for us. It was just, remember the day that I worked out how to connect it, completely changed our travel company back then. But I would say it's really, I'd probably say, 2016, 2017, basically when Selena hostels came into Costa Rica.
I see.
So we were in Panama actually at the time when the guys that started Selena hostels were actually just starting there as well. My business partner, Casey, was opening a hotel, which I invested in Pedesi. The original Selena hostels guys actually were down there. And then they opened one of their first ones here in Costa Rica because they sold it they bought it from a friend of mine, Fanny, who owned, God, what was the name of the property? I can't even remember now because it was one of my first stays in Costa Rica in Manuel Antonio. And that's when I really was like, okay, what is this? And I was like, wait, it's a hostel where people work. Like I didn't quite get it because it was pretty new. Mm-hmm. And then I started.
Aren't hostels for partying? Aren't they for teenagers that are partying? What's this co-working space?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's basically what happened was, Selena hostels was smart. They got onto a trend beforehand, which was that like people didn't want to wait till they were 65 to travel. They wanted to also they didn't want to take a gap year and not have any income. They kind of wanted to work. They wanted to travel. They wanted to have fun, and it kind of put all this stuff into a cocktail mixer and then shook it up. And then kind of Selena Hostels was kind of the first one that I was really aware of. I'm sure there were other ones out there that really, I would say here in Costa Rica, kind of started to do it on a I would say mass level.
Yeah, I've stayed in Selena hostels, I believe in Nosara and in Monteverde. And I think that's I don't think I've stayed in Selena other parts of the world, even though I've been to other parts of the world. So I associate Selena a lot with Costa Rica. And I know that it did start in Panama, like you mentioned. So maybe that's a good segue into the fact that to introduce your firm. You are a content creator and a podcaster, but that content creation supports a larger firm that has interests in real estate and financial investments in Costa Rica. Do you want to introduce that a little bit before we move on?
Well, I mean, I come from really a hospitality background. I sold last year, I used to own Costa Rica's largest luxury travel company, or Central America's largest luxury travel company, which is the NAMU Travel Group. We managed about 25,000 people a year here in Costa Rica, very luxurious. So, it's how I got my start because really here, real estate and investments follows hospitality, so and I say hospitality, I mean travel and tourism. So I was in that world, helping hoteliers and others basically make investments in Costa Rica. But really, I was the chief operating officer. We were managing 150 people, $75 million a year in sales to just Costa Rica. 150 people. It was like juggling chainsaws. So, and again, transition from that into kind of full in investments and development and real estate. So what I do is, Costa Rican can be complicated, but really as I'm bringing the world of real estate investments and hospitality together. Why? Because hospitality dictates where real estate goes, and real estate dictates where investment goes, and kind of investment sometimes dictates where hospitality goes. So it's kind of, a bit of a triangle there. So I'm constantly looking at that data, analyzing tourism data, analyzing real estate data, analyzing vacation rental data, looking at values based on return, and just kind of really trying to find the diamonds. And then I run an investment fund, as well as people hire us to help them invest. And yeah, so we have properties all over Costa Rica. I worked on hotels, individual condos, bits of land, developing larger resorts. It's kind of a wide myriad of things that we've worked on here.
In terms of the investors or the clients of your projects, investors in your projects or the clients of your services, what's the breakdown roughly between, let's say, Canadians, Americans, Europeans, Asians,
Sure.
and Latin Americans? Where do your investors come from?
Mainly, I would say North America and Europe. If I
Yeah.
would have to say, I'd probably say 60% the US, 30% Canadian, and then 10% from Europe. I don't really get huge amounts outside of that. Every so often, I get an Australian here or there. But really, I'm going to say, and Europe, I'm talking more like Switzerland, and it's usually old money that I get from Europe.
Mhm.
But I would say mainly North Americans, and some of the time it's investors. A lot of the Canadians that I'm dealing with are like relocating, and a lot of young families are looking to relocate as well. So I've seen that quite a bit, for various reasons. And then with that, of course, comes investment as well, because they're like, okay, I want to move there, but I also kind of want to have some form of investment. So a lot of the time they're buying
Mhm.
either a home with some vacation rentals on, that they could make a good return on, they could live off that, making $3,000 to $5,000 a month on that, or they want to buy two bits of land, one for their home and then one to actually develop an actual business on.
I found I'm not an expert in this, and you're certainly much more of an expert than me. But I know, sort of just through being a person in business for several decades and years, that when you're, let's say, in the United States or Canada, and you want to get into investing in real estate, there's often all kinds of local domestic tricks, tax benefits, ways to amortize real estate over several years. And I think you've already alluded to this as well, or alluded to the fact that the people coming down to Costa Rica have a blend of interests. It might be financial, but also moving a family and having a vacation home. Do you find that type of uh, we want a vacation home for 6 weeks and we want income for another 10 or 11 months is the classic split? Or is there a split between pure vacation home, pure investment in terms of what people are looking for?
Man, it's all over the map.
Yeah.
I mean, we deal with so much stuff. I mean, I love dealing with the people that are looking for kind of a vacation rental property here, that kind of blends lifestyle and investment, because it's kind of fun. When it's investment, it's ones and zeros. It's, I would say, not as fun as dealing with someone where you have to get to know their goals, who they are, what people they want to be around, what's important to them, the life that they're living, but also what the life that they want to leave at, to live at some point. What stuff would you like to be doing, and making sure that like the now and the future can kind of be encompassed in a certain area, and that they're kind of around their tribe. And then from there is just making sure that they have a clear plan for making returns annually, and we provide them a financial model with comparables of what that could look like. Put them in touch with property management companies that suits really the goals that they have. I mean, if they're looking to just aggressively rent, there are better companies than, hey, I just want to, I want to kind of cover my bills. And sometimes it's like, I don't really care. I just want someone to property manage it, but I don't want to rent it really. I just want to come back. So It's just, I mean, it's all over the map of the stuff that we deal with. But usually I would say that there is some form of investment element there. Because if there's not, like, you could just buy anywhere. We're just really guides. Sometimes it feels like we're financial and life coaches kind of rolled into one. Because we'll say to people sometimes of like, look, I don't think you should do this. And this is why. And the reason that we can do that, Curtis, is because people hire us. Like, we're not like realtors. We don't chase commissions. People actually hire us as consultants. I mean, I think it's like financial advisors or accountants or lawyers that, like, whenever you want to do something complicated, you're only as good as the team that you've got around you. And Costa Rica certainly is that, because again, it's an unregulated market. It's caveat emptor, buyer beware, and you just need to know what you're doing in Latin America and especially in Costa Rica.
What does that mean, unregulated? So what kinds of things might you expect in Canada or the United States that you just need to let go of or realize are not regulated in Costa Rica?
Look, I mean, if a realtor knows that something's wrong with a property or there is a body buried somewhere or something's not right, here they don't really have a duty to say that to you. And like, I think in Canada and the US, they do. I think the good ones here will, of course, they'll give you the black and white of it. But, it's an unregulated market. I mean, anyone can become a realtor. You could come down tomorrow, Curtis, and say, I'm a realtor. Okay, really, you should be SUHEF registered, which is our SEC. But again, a lot of people don't do that. It's not necessity. You just need to be really careful of like dealing with reputable people with references, just because, again, if you buy and something goes wrong, the realtor is going to go, dude, you should have done your due diligence. And that's where a lot of the time, clients come to us when they're either before that stage or they know that when they hire us with the due diligence of like, look, we go really deep in due diligence. I mean, septic tank, analysis is, water analysis, soil studies, topography studies of making sure that zoning is right, of just making sure that everything is, and then if it's a working business, Curtis, as well, when it's a vacation rental, etc., it's just checking the numbers to make sure they make sense. So, a lawyer can do the legal part, but there's nobody taking care of kind of more the function of the house. Man, it's just, they say that Costa Rica is a sunny place for shady people. That's always kind of, and I mean, I'd say that everywhere is. Just here, there's no going back. There's no suing anyone. So you just better make sure that you have a really good team to go into it. Like, it's a great country. It really is. But you just need to trust but verify everything.
Got it. Yeah. And maybe on the appeal of Costa Rica, and just giving a bit more context before we get into some of the effects of remote workers there. So it's a Central American country. If you think about the thin, narrow peninsula that has both a Pacific and a Caribbean side, and they're pretty close together, that area of land that connects North and South America in Central America. It's the second to last one, Costa Rica, then Panama, and then it's the Darien Gap. You can't really get to Colombia because there's a jungle that's impassable. So
you can go through it.
You can.
You don't want to.
Yeah, you could go through it, but you probably wouldn't want to.
Yep.
In terms of the geography, and I'm gonna give a very simplistic or a broad overview. There's essentially a Central Valley area that you can fly into in the capital city, San Jose, and then there are. It's not that far. I would say less than 5 or 6 hours to get to a Caribbean side, the Nicoya Peninsula in the west, and Guanacaste in the northwest, and then a southern, more rural peninsula in the southern area, the southern peninsula in places like Osa Peninsula and Drake Bay. And then, I haven't covered everything, but there's 5 or 6 or 7 regions. Are you focused on any particular region with your firm, or are you national, everywhere, agnostic to exactly where?
Yeah, I mean, we are everywhere. And the reason being, Curtis, is it gives us perspective, and that's why I actually live in the Central Valley, because I can fly anywhere. Like tomorrow, I take a 30-minute flight and I'm in the Northern Pacific area. Next week in Monday, I'm in La Fortuna. It's a 3-hour drive. But then the following week, I'm down in Manuel Antonio. It's a 15-minute flight for me, so driver drives down there, I fly. And even the OSA, like, that's the great thing. Our domestic airline here, it's okay, 18-seater Cessna planes, but I pay like $100 and can go anywhere in the country, So where a drive might take 4 or 5 hours, I can be there in like 30 minutes or 40 minutes, in a flight. So, but we go everywhere, basically all over. I mean, we've got stuff in the Caribbean, we've got stuff in Arenal, Monteverde, we've got stuff in the Osa, Uvita, we've got stuff in Nosara, Samara, all the way up in Guanacaste, Tamarindo, Playa Hermosa. We have a huge perspective of the whole country. because it allows us to give that perspective to clients.
Got it. And for clients, they may be, I'm sure many of your clients have visited many times and are familiar with Costa Rica and its regions and what it's like. But for those that know it sort of as an idea or as a stereotype, maybe they're familiar with Florida and Mexico and Playa del Carmen and Puerto Vallarta, and they think about real estate in Costa Rica. We can imagine what the Mexican real estate on the Cancun, on the Quintana Roo side or the Cancun coast is. Lots of all-inclusive resorts, some gated communities. I know, and I've seen that Costa Rica is certainly not like Mexico. It's quite different. But for someone who's just getting acquainted with Costa Rica, maybe listening to this podcast or one of your podcasts for the first time, what are the ways that you introduce people to think about how Costa Rica might be different? It's not just another hot place. It's a different country, and it's quite different. What stereotypes do you see people bring with them? And do you ever have to kind of educate people like, this is what you should expect in Costa Rica? It's a little bit different than your Playa del Carmen condo or your Florida condo.
Sure. Look, I mean, I think just to give the summary of Costa Rica from a terrain point of view of like, as you mentioned there, it's like a rectangle that's sitting horizontally, with the Caribbean on one side and the Pacific on the other. And through the middle is basically a mountain range. And, we have volcanoes there with 30 different microclimates. If you want to be cold, I mean, I was up at the peak of Chirripó the other day. It was 6 degrees Celsius. I could see the Caribbean and the Pacific on both sides, watching the sunrise. Exceptional. So if you want cold, I mean, we can get down to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius here at altitude. But if you want hot and humid, or you want hot and dry, like we have all these microclimates, here. But the further south you get, the more jungly the country gets. This country has 6% of the world's biodiversity. About 40% of the country is national parks and reserves. Okay. So there's a huge focus on here on, sustainability, ecotourism. And the people here, it constantly is voted one of the happiest countries in the world. 99% of our electricity is basically renewable here. The cost of living is probably about the same as North America or Canada. But again, I say that we pay for the freedom that we have. I say that we pay for the weather that we have. And, all of our food comes from here in Costa Rica. We don't really import much apart from, gas, petrol. The reason being is because Costa Rica will not allow drilling because of, its focus on sustainability, wildlife preservation, and its biodiversity. So that just gives you an idea. Costa Rica has never really suffered. And I'll say that. And I mean, I'll probably get beaten up for that, but had a civil war, 46 to 48, 2,000 people died, and that's it. I'm simplifying stuff here, but the country has been peaceful. It's one of the top democracies in the world. People are like, wow, it just seems so there's not these two parties. I'm like, there are 25 presidential candidates in the last election for the one guy. Wow. So usually the best guy usually wins. The problem is they never have a majority, so nothing really ever gets done, which is the beauty of the country. It's just slow and steady. It's organic. This country made a variety of decisions over the years, and this wasn't planned out. If anyone says it was planned out, they're lying to you, man, because people here are just relaxed. It's chilled. There is no long-term plan. The long-term plan is protect the environment. And don't let people build huge towers on the beach here. And if they're going to build all inclusives, that's the area. The Northern Pacific area is where it is. But it's so difficult and expensive to do now that unless you're a Ritz-Carlton or, Six Senses, financially, it doesn't make sense to bring in, a mid-level Barcelo, Occidental, level hotel. I mean, they're there because they were built years back, but this country is just it's expensive now, which I'm sure that you've seen, Curtis.
It is quite striking to walk through the thickets on the way through the trail to the beach at Nosara, look north, look south along a beautiful beach, and not even see a single tower for miles and miles, kilometers and kilometers anywhere, which you wouldn't get on most parts of the Mexican coasts, which are the closest analog that I've been to. I've noticed that you tend to ask a question. I'm actually curious about this. You ask your guests quite often, regularly, almost at the end of the episode, and I definitely encourage people to listen to these episodes because I'm addicted to them and I think they're very informative. But you ask your guests, who are often experts in law, real estate, civil engineering, sales. They're all kinds of experts from all around Costa Rica, and you ask them, if you had 500K, 500 grand to invest anywhere in Costa Rica, what would you do? And then they give you an answer, and the answer is very quite a bit. After asking that question, what I imagine what could be now hundreds of times, do you see any trends? Are there themes that emerge from getting that data again and again and again from the people that know best?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one that I get most is I'm going to buy a piece of land that's just set back a little bit from the beach, that's somewhat affordable, 50 to 100,000, and then put like, units on it to rent either short term or long term. I
Yeah.
mean, we don't really have tiny housing here in Costa Rica. I mean, I would do a lot probably with tiny homes on it, around a large social area and a pool, because
Hmm.
again, the short term, I mean, we don't spend much time inside here. When we're
Yeah.
we've got 19 home builds on at the moment that we've helped a client go from finding land to building and win the design process. And I'm like, you don't need a house that big. Like your social area doesn't, like your inside and outside needs to blend and flow because we spend most our time outside, and make sure it's covered because the sun here is strong, but also as we get heavy rains in the afternoons sometimes, which I love because it brings the temperature down. But there's definitely a trend, coastal areas for sure, just because the numbers don't usually work here in the city. Here in the city, you get, anywhere from 4 to 6% returns, at the beach, long term, maybe 8 to 12, and short term, you could do 15 to 20% returns depending on what it is. But there is a tendency to move towards, I would say, short-term vacation rentals, multiple units on an individual lot.
Yeah, that's very specific, and I think it for the North American or probably many European listeners, the starting point, the entry point to get into a project and start doing something that will have an ROI, or very likely will have an ROI. I guess no guarantees, but should have an ROI, is quite low relative to, I'm in Western Canada right now. A lot of people listening are in Canada, the United States, and Europe, and you want to buy a house. I'm looking out here. I can see outside my window. This is an audio podcast, so no one can see what I'm pointing at. But a regular house here is 1.4 million Canadian dollars for a house that was built 50 years ago. So it is quite striking that a little piece of paradise is the entry point to get started, whether it's land or something else. So, a condo or a detached house is I don't want to say shockingly cheap, because I think it makes sense. It's not necessarily it's not New York, so that makes sense. But it still seems like there's a lot of opportunity that I think most people would be probably shocked to see what they
Yeah,
could do to get
look,
started on.
you can get a one bedroom, like kind of somewhat nice place here, condo, I mean, there's stuff at $120,000, that's already done. But like, if you want to buy a piece of land for 30, 40,000 and you don't care that it has like a ocean view, once you start getting to ocean views, you get premium. But if you have it set back like 5, 10 minutes away and like, you could get a very nice prefab unit, one bedroom prefab unit for like $50,000, and it comes with everything inside it, on your land. You all in, you could probably be in for about $110,000, as a start.
Wow. Yeah. So getting to digital nomads and remote workers, I guess another question that you asked, maybe not as much as the 500K. How has the market been going? We see in other parts of the world that there is a recession. I don't want. I'm not the economist in the newspapers or whatever, but there is a recession in jobs. There was a boom time for the kind of tech workers that can become digital nomads and remote workers, the kind of knowledge workers, coming into the pandemic, and then with the acceleration of remote work from the pandemic and the acceleration of a lot of different companies hiring, mega hiring, whether it's the big tech companies in the United States or other companies, that was going on. And then sometime in 2022, there were more layoffs around. And I'm speaking about a very specific niche. I know this isn't the whole market. There's retired people coming to Costa Rica. There's students coming to Costa Rica. So I don't want to make it sound like I think that this niche is the whole world. But I am curious if you have seen waves come and go around, whether it's are the Salinas are packed and then they seem a little bit half full, or how has the migration of this class of workers, remote workers or digital nomads, if you will, what's the vibe around how many of them there are, whether it's increasing, flattening out, and how are they affecting real estate and just society and the economics of places in Costa Rica? Are they a force, or are they just? I also, I guess, maybe one more question is: do they even matter compared to the tourists? Uh,
No,
we
no.
think we think that they're this trend, but they might be still a very fractional percentage of what's affecting and moving the needle.
Look, I don't know. I don't have the stats to answer that question really, Curtis. But
Yeah.
I think from moving the needle, I know a lot of hoteliers, a lot of developers here in Costa Rica. I think we're seeing a return to normality of what it was. The tide has risen, but it's now returning to a pre-COVID seasonality, should I say. The numbers are higher. Again, the tide has risen. There are definitely more digital nomads here, Curtis, than there were prior to COVID, of course. I think it's a trend that's here to stay just because I look at my own business of like none of us, maybe we come together once a week, once every couple of weeks. This Friday we're going up to the mountains, but like people want to work from home, man. And I
Yeah.
think any smart company is going to allow people to do that, and they are allowing to do it. I mean, like any young person looking for a job at the moment is probably like, look, I want to work from home, or I want to be able to, I want to be able to become a digital nomad. It's a huge benefit to especially young people. So I don't think it's a trend that's stopping. Here in Costa Rica, again, I mean, Selena Hostel seems to be doing well. Maybe their share price not doing as good as they'd like it to do, but they seem to be doing well. Hoteliers, May was a little softer. I think June will be a little softer than previous years, but still, it's really difficult to compare it to like 21 and 22. Like you have to compare 2023 to 2019 is what you have to do, because
Hmm.
2019 was the standard. It was the benchmark. 21, 22 was everyone was drunk and on drugs, dude. I mean, it was
Hmm.
just crazy. Money was floating around. The US printed 23% of all money in circulation. It's nuts.
Yeah.
As you mentioned there with tech jobs, they were just throwing money around. Now reality is set in, and everyone looks down and they've got a big belly and they're like, wow, I got a better, suck in the belt and basically get fit. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. So I think we're definitely seeing probably a bit of a decline, Curtis, on like
Hmm.
digital nomads. I don't have data to back that up. But tourism numbers, January, February, March, April, were records for this country. May looks like it'll probably be a record as well. But I think definitely the luxury end of the market is doing very well. I mean, what I see, Curtis, is more executive style digital nomads than young digital nomads. A lot of people coming here, moving with families, but a lot of the people that moved here with families are still here. Like they're staying here the long term. So I don't know whether you
Hmm.
consider that a digital nomad because like they came as digital nomads and now they're staying.
Yeah, they may simply be expats, remote workers, and the stereotype of digital nomad doesn't apply to them anymore.
One thing, Curtis, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Yeah.
One thing
No, go for it.
people have said is like, I can't believe how good the fiber optic internet is in Costa Rica. Like I was on the
Yeah.
call the other day with a guy in California and he was having internet problems. And I was like, is it me or is it you? And he was like, no, it's me. This is really weird. And I'm like, yeah, we don't really have, internet problems.
Yeah.
It's like great. I mean, I have 300 meg up and 300 meg down, and I pay like
Yeah.
$65 a month for it.
Yeah, that's just competitive or better than up north. Would you say that setting aside, how many are digital nomads versus remote workers versus executives, in general, is the work from home concept affecting how houses are built, how hotels are building out
Yes.
their services and ancillary facilities? What are they doing differently? It sounds like yes. So what are they
Well, yeah, I mean,
doing differently? Yeah.
the answer is yes across the board. I mean, when we build homes now, when we design homes, there's usually an office in it. There's usually an enclosed office space in it. If we're unable to do that, we'll put desks in the rooms. And that desk could just be a nice piece of teak wood, with a seat on it, with a plug. With hotels, again, we're doing both in room and also building kind of, meeting spaces, I would say meeting spaces is in like there is a community area and then there is an area to go and have, private meetings like a phone booth. So 100% yes. And I don't think that's anything that's going to change because like I'm going to Europe for 3 weeks. I'm still going to work, a little bit here and there. Unfortunately, my dad's house in France doesn't have that, but or the house in England doesn't have that. But like I'll just find a room somewhere. Like I have a desk in a room in London that I use when I go back.
We're seeing in other places like Lisbon and Mexico City, and again, this is really niche. It's niche about remote workers and digital nomads, but we're seeing a bit of a backlash because the economy has turned a bit. The interest rates are up in North America and in Europe, at least. So local rent is up in places, and the locals are in some cases, in isolated cases, saying remote workers go home, digital nomads go home. We don't want you here. You're gentrifiers. In my experience of visiting Costa Rica and the pura vida lifestyle and meeting with ticos and ticas, I've never experienced that in Costa Rica, and I don't get the vibe. Do you foresee, the next decade, it's going to be full speed ahead with the locals welcoming the arrival of expats and people from places outside of Costa Rica to come and live there? And is there any political backlash to expats?
No, I mean, you have to understand Costa Rica is very organic. So, and it's very family orientated, which means that like we don't see these huge ups and downs. And I mean that in construction and tons of digital nomads coming. And like Costa Rica just has a way, and I don't know how, of just organically allowing things to happen, allowing the amount of digital nomads to come here. Because again, there's just not like to build something anywhere close to the beach, is very difficult because the first 200 meters concession, then back from that, of like, it's not impossible, but it gets a little bit more difficult. But then if you go back a kilometer back, land like gets really cheap. Like there's still, this country has tons of land. We don't build up much, so like we don't really see a lot of that because again, prices are kind of the same in supermarkets all around Costa Rica. So it's not that in tourist, and it's a small country. It's not the size of Mexico, it's not the size of Portugal. We have 6 million people here. Locals love foreigners because it gives them jobs, it gives them work, and really is, again, Costa Ricans are just happy with what they've got, man, and being present. It's just great being here. In the Western world, we're constantly thinking ahead. We're trying to think, and maybe that comes from, harvesting, where we had to sow seeds and harvest, and we always had to be planning forwards. Whereas here in Costa Rica, you just wake up in the morning, walk outside, and grab a mango, or you grab like an apple, like or banana or plátano, or like everything's here. So it's just different, but no, not at all. I mean, Costa Ricans and ticos and ticas love foreigners, man. I mean, it's great to interact. A lot of people are well educated. They speak English here. They've started their businesses around them. It gets work. As long as, again, ticos have like money coming in, they can grab a beer. They're just happy being present, man.
One of the things that comes up in your podcast episodes is what kinds of services are gaps in the market, just ready and waiting for entrepreneurs to pick up a need for something and start a business locally somewhere. Are there certain things you see, if there's entrepreneurs listening to the podcast that might think, I want to go to Costa Rica and maybe entertain the idea of generating my income? Maybe they're not a digital nomad. They want to come and be a local entrepreneur or find something where there's a need in the market. Do you see certain services, or do your guests tell you that certain services are like, oh yeah, we'd love to have this, more of this, some
Yeah.
kind of business in Costa Rica?
I mean, I'm an entrepreneur by heart. I'm constantly starting businesses. I think I've got like 4 at the moment, and I'm thinking about starting a 5th one, which is a luxury
Yeah.
transfer company. Why? Just because I see these opportunities. If the numbers work out, I'm like, well, like, let's do it. I learned a long time ago, me being in one business for 50 years is never going to happen. Like, I can't be in that one business and do that same job for 50 years. Like, if I see opportunities, I have to do it. And again, a lot of people are like that. Like, you've got all these expats coming down. Health insurance, who's managing, where's the insurance brokers? I don't see that many down here that are from abroad, so have insurance brokers that can work internationally between US insurers, Costa Rican insurers. That's one. Taxes, North Americans still need to file taxes. Like, okay, how do you manage income in Costa Rica, taxes in Costa Rica? How do you pass that forward to the US or Canada so you're not getting double taxed? Those kind of things. Estate planning, there's all of these services that are around all these people that are moving here. Toy shops, I mean, I know it sounds crazy. Toy shop. You have all these families in these areas. They're going to parties. They need to buy toys for the kids, like when it's parties and kind of stuff, or toys. They don't exist, So,
Yeah.
like I say, there's a saying here: "Hay plata en el calle." There's money in the street. You just need to pick it up. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to see it. And just ask people, hey, what's the stuff that you wish that you had? And they'll tell you. And I mean, that's what I do in my business. Is everyone's like, Rich, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I'm like, buddy, I don't want to wake up tomorrow morning and have my cup of coffee. And like my clients will tell me where I need to go. I've got a general north of what we do for our business and the value that we add. But like I'm constantly asking clients of like, what was difficult? What do you wish that like you'd have had that you didn't have? How can we improve? And really they dictate, where we go. I was never going to get into building until a client was like, well, Rich, I don't want to really buy the piece of land and like work with an architect to not have to do it. And I was like, okay, so, I now have, 4 engineers in my office who help with the whole construction process from start to finish. We don't do it. We oversee it. We do the construction bidding. Why? Because I want to start to finish product for a client where they don't have to worry about anything. Like we will take care of everything for them.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I was just thinking about something you were saying earlier about working with like working with old money folks, and it just triggered this thought in my head about how Costa Rica certainly stands out among the Central American countries. Its reputation as a safe, stable democracy is untouched amongst its neighbors. But when you're dealing with possible investors and what you're doing and your various investment and real estate projects, do you find that Costa Rica competes globally, like almost on the Sotheby's and Christie's circuit of, you might have a Swiss person from old money who says, we're thinking about Costa Rica, but we might also do Croatia or Greece or somewhere. Does it enter that conversation, or is it really unique and almost uncomparable amongst other places to invest in? I don't,
It gets compared to
this
Hawaii.
class.
It gets compared to
Hawaii. Yeah.
a lot. Like
Yeah.
or Hawaii, like Mexico, it's just like, look, guys, like you can't. Mexico is Mexico. Like Costa Rica is not. Is not Mexico. Costa Rica, Mexico is more buildings, condos, like it's fast and like, but the problem is that they have a security. Like here in Costa Rica, it's secure. Like, you don't need to worry that you're going to get shot on the beach or anything here. Like, the thing to worry about here at the beaches is, of like, where can I find shade and where am I going to get a cocktail? That's kind of the things here. Like, it's just a very safe country. But a lot of people compare it to Hawaii, just because how it, volcanoes and rainforests. The problem is Hawaii is probably 5 times the cost. It's already overbuilt. Costa Rica is just more natural, because you can't just find a piece of land and build here. You have to find a piece of land. You have to make sure it has, water letter, it's right zoning, etc. And then then you need to go through the process of like 12 to 14 months of design and construction. So it's just not something you click your fingers and it's ready.
Well, I think that
and time zone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's actually a great point. Yeah. The time zone is going to be so time zone. I don't know, arbitrage, whatever you want to call it, alignment with all of the people that are in North America and are able or working with North American clients and companies and colleagues and are able to work remotely. And, as much as the world can be asynchronous, you can work across time zones. There's just still something about that being on the same time zone. And Costa Rica is right smack in the middle of being able to work with Hawaii, California, New York, Toronto, whatever, across Canada and the United States. It's aligned with all that. But yeah, I think this is whatever we call them: expats, remote workers, permanent immigrants, permanent residents, digital nomads. I have a feeling there's going to be more and more of them coming to Costa Rica to pursue a new life. So just curious, if people are listening and want to find more of your content on the internet and find out more about you, where should they go?
I mean, you can go to Spotify or Apple and just type in Costa Rica real estate and investments. You'll find the podcast there. I mean, we're chatting. I just recorded my 150th one.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
They can go to our website, investingcostarica.com. I mean, I think the podcast has the majority of like, they're 15 to 30 minute episodes. Every so often I'll have one that goes a little bit longer, just because the topic is interesting and the person wants to talk about it. And I think it's relevant. But I would say that just go on to Spotify, Apple, YouTube, type in Costa Rica real estate investments, or you can go to our website, investingcostarica.com, and you can just reach us, just email us. Like I respond to most emails. Like I'm not, people are like, Rich, I can't believe that like you'll meet with anyone for 15 minutes. And I'm like, I've been in those shoes before where you're lost, you don't know what it is that you do. I've taken on interns who just reached out to me and were like, Rich, I like what you're doing. Like, how could I come and work for you? And I'm like, I remember being in that position when I was 21 years old, looking to figure out what I was going to do in my life, and all I wanted was that opportunity. So I was like, I'm going to give that person that opportunity, so we constantly have interns coming in and out, from all over the world and here in Costa Rica as well.
Well, Rich, I really appreciate you going a little bit longer than 15 minutes with me to record this pod. I think it's been super informative, and listeners that whether they're digital nomads or remote workers in my audience, or they're just anyone that's interested, will add everything that you mentioned about your searching on Spotify and Apple and your website to the show notes so people can find it easily. And I hope that they'll check out 150 or more episodes of your feed.
Appreciate it, man. Really appreciate you taking the time and having me on the podcast. And yeah, anything you need, just let me know.
Thanks, Richard. Pura vida.
Yeah.